The 2018 movie Ready Player One had mixed reviews on its initial release. But things have gotten interesting and honestly a little bit alarming when we are starting to see glimpses of things from a movie that was set in 2045 today. With Apple's recent reveal of its latest invention, the Vision Pro has once again caused what I call the Apple effect, introducing technology to the public consciousness and gaining attention very quickly. Did anyone else notice how no one was really hyped about VR when Meta was funneling cash into it? But now that Apple has entered the game with its all-new mixed reality, it's sent ripples across the entire industry. Well, now people are really starting to question, is this actually going to go mainstream? How can I afford the latest iPhone as well as the Vision Pro? And most importantly, how will VR alter the fabric of our society? Ready Player One is set in 2045, where, similar to most sci-fi settings in the future, the world as we know it is not looking too good. Climate change has done its damage, energy crisis, as well as widespread inequality and unequal wealth distribution. The main character lives in what's basically a skyscraper of trailer parks, and everything looks pretty bleak other than the one saving grace of the new world, the virtual reality called Oasis, where people can be anyone or anything they want to be, offering an alternate life to the grim reality they actually live in. During the movie, a greedy big corporation called IOI is trying its best to take over Oasis after the original founder James Holloway dies, leaving behind an Easter egg quest where whoever finishes it first basically gains control over the Oasis and essentially life. And it's only natural, therefore, that IOI, which is a big corporation with money to burn, is trying its best to take over and win this quest in order to gain as much control and capitalize it as much as possible. Anyway, do things sound a little bit familiar in this world, or is it just me? Now, if we put on our thinking hats, we can see how, if we apply the concepts to our world today, Oasis, originally designed to be a haven for all, could be simplified to be a representation of open source technology and having things be built openly rather than closed and locked up. Think about the early days of the internet when it was first invented, allowing open communication across the world no matter what web browser you use or device. You can still access it compared to today, where platforms lock you in their own applications and need you to sign in for everything. But with IOI or the big corporations coming in to cash in, they really prefer a closed-off system, and in this instance, Apple is no different. They are no stranger to locking in their ecosystem and not being friendly if you don't want everything to be in their system. See how long the iPhone is taking to adopt USB-C after all these years just so they can sell their proprietary cables, or the control over the Apple Store and taking large cuts and developers not being able to do anything about it. There's obviously a competitive aspect and reasoning behind it, but at the end of the day, it isn't a good sign for what's to come if a single company is able to control the whole ecosystem. Now, in today's world, we are at a slightly different timeline where there isn't just a single monopoly just yet. Meta was one of the earlier players in the field after buying out Oculus and has been trying to push adoption for a while with its Quest series. So we have yet to really see the mass population adopt VR just yet, as everyone is waiting to see which technology giant actually takes over. And this is a warning sign for why competition is important, as we should be concerned with understanding how much power a single company would have if there was no competition. They could do whatever they wanted after it becomes mainstream. Just take a look at Reddit and how it was originally supposed to be a community for everything and everyone, but over time many subreddits were banned simply because they weren't to go look for a company trying to IPO, and things slowly changed to be more and more profit driven with things like Reddit avatars, Reddit awards, and introducing the new app, and disabling third-party ones by restricting the API. Is this slow, disturbing decline an inevitable future for any large tech company who has no real competitor? So what happens when VR actually does become mainstream? Even in the current day with social media, the temptation of being the main character in our own custom-tailored virtual world is a trend that's amplified in our hyper-connected, hyper-visual age. But it's important to remember that this tantalizing illusion can blur the line between our physical reality and virtual dreams. It's almost a very subtle way for our brain to rewire our own perception of reality, to think others are NPCs and perceives ourselves as the most important thing, despite really being infinitesimal in the grand scheme of things.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
The popular phrase "literally me" embodies this, as we see media write their stories in a way to allow the general audience to resonate well with characters, rather than letting the characters be their own unique selves. Now, VR will only exaggerate this effect when suddenly you can potentially be whoever with whatever appearance as long as you pay for it. Suddenly, the delusion of people trying to appear rich by wearing designer clothes is extended by also having a virtual luxury car, and I guess you can't drive it, but at least you look cool. But then the question is, how will the truly rich differentiate themselves anymore in this virtual world? Because throughout history, there's always been a way for the rich to differentiate themselves from the poor. The escapism rabbit hole continues, as it will only be easier than ever to lose sight of what's really important for each person. What about our friends and social interactions? It's ironic that in the movie, Wade's closest friend H is someone he's never even met outside the Oasis in real life. Virtual interactions replace physical ones, and that's a theme we've already started trialing before a few years ago during the lockdowns. Back then, we were limited to video calls at best. We didn't have sensors tracking and mimicking our eye movements and expressions to the same extent the Vision Pro promises. And that's a scary thing to think about, that maybe perhaps we might actually like or prefer this virtual contact over meeting up in person, simply because of convenience. After all, doesn't it sound easier than getting changed, getting ready, taking the time to get there through the train or the bus and meeting up in person? Now, I know it's not the most direct comparison, but Uber Eats and food delivery industry continues to exist is clear proof that people really do value convenience in the modern world, indicating that there is a good chance that virtual meetups could become a real thing. Now, the issue with more and more people staying online all the time is it naturally causes more divide over time on the internet, as ideologies naturally clash. Just look at Twitter or any comment section on any social media platform, and there's always that constant feeling of debate and dissent amongst the populations and demographics due to lack of empathy, and people forgetting that there are real people behind the walls of text. The risk here is that if the virtual world is even more engaging than our phones, which already average such high screen times, that this will further isolate people into the online world and create further divide and dissociation from reality. I guess you could argue that the internet will feel less anonymous if everyone is using an actual avatar and can see facial expressions. But in the end, the internet simply forms echo chambers by itself, because that is simply how people get engaged online. It's been widely known that loneliness has been increasing paradoxically with the rise of social media, where people feel more alone than ever despite being connected to hundreds or thousands of people online. We simply don't feel the same level of connection, and in a way are overwhelmed by being connected all the time and keeping up with the latest trends. So the question remains as to whether or not Zuckerberg's promise of VR being able to bridge this gap will actually remain true, and whether or not VR can genuinely fulfill our needs for social interaction. Or maybe it will simply make us feel more lonely than ever and out of touch with our friends. So is it all doom and gloom for the future of society if VR actually does take over? Well, not necessarily. As Apple mentions with their marketing, they are trying to push for mixed reality rather than a completely virtual world. One where it augments life rather than simply replaces it. And as skeptical as I am, it's not like a company, even if it's Apple, can force people to use their products. After all, it's not like when the smartphone was first invented, everyone would predict how much it actually captured our attention and time. So ultimately, no matter how immersive and fun the virtual world is, it's up to us to stay grounded in reality. By the end of Ready Player One, after Wade successfully defeats the bad guys and retrieves the golden egg, he chats with the creator of the Oasis, James Holliday, who mentions that in a way he regrets making it in the first place, because he realizes everyone was getting out of touch with reality, despite it being his original intention to escape in the first place, since he was so afraid of connecting with people in the real world.
So you now have the power to turn the Oasis off forever. You understand?
We can only hope that the companies frontiering this new technology are as altruistic and thoughtful as he was. But of course, life isn't a movie, and in real life we will most definitely not be seeing Zuckerberg or Tim Cook pull a Willy Wonka and give full control over their companies. But the point James Holliday stands. As terrifying and painful as reality can be, it's also the only place that you can get a decent meal.
Because reality is real.